Welcome to the Friday afternoon debrief. So it's nice to see you, Robyn and Caitlin. We're so happy to have you join us today for our Friday debrief. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks. You so much. So excited. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I can't wait to have you guys unpack the great project that you've been working on this week. So I'm going to actually just turn it over to Robyn and let her sort of summarize what we've done, and then let's really unpack this really cool next step that we've taken with using AI to analyze students' writing feedback.
Awesome. So as you know, we've been using a graphic organizer in third grade to, as a framework for writing, and it was called the ICE-T method. And we started doing that in September. As the year went on, when the students were ready to elaborate a little bit more, we added because it was called the ICE-T, we added 2 extra doses of sweetener, which were 2 sentences that they used with their elaboration to elaborate a little bit more on their text and their writing. Then we saw that it was still kind of like a framework of writing. The elaboration sentences, after we ran the data and scored it ourselves, were just not where we wanted the writing to be at a certain point in October in third grade. And we kind of, sat down, we reflected on it, and we decided to add more specific elaboration sentence to the already ICE-T. And we called them the yummy sentences, which were our 3 M sentences, MMM. Make it your own. Why does it matter? And what does it mean? Those were the quotes from the text that we were using. So that goes along with our graphic organizer. Once we did that, we saw that the students really had more of an elaborated writing and really were reaching those 3s and really high 2s for the rubric that we gave them, which was based on the standards of the New Jersey State Learning Assessment, the NJSLA. We also incorporated a graphic organizer in because as we ran this data, we saw that their grammar and their sentence structures were not reaching that level 3. So we came up with a fun acronym, the ITOPCC, check your work to get a 3. And we used that as our checklist in third grade. And once we added all of those pieces in about 2 weeks ago, students really started to develop their writing. We saw more of those 3s coming in. Last week when we touched base, we had 9 students in my third grade class reach a 3, and we're going to continue from there because we decided that we kind of came full circle with that whole planning method of that ICE-T graphic organizer, adding all of these pieces in based on data and best practices that we saw. And now we turnkeyed it since I was teaching it, and I was kind of internalizing that instructional concept as a teacher. I modeled and taught it for my students to kind of deepen their understanding. And then we turnkeyed it this week to collaborate so that my students were the leaders. So now they can learn, teach, and lead.
Yay.
And now we turnkeyed. So we came full circle. We turnkeyed, and now we're spiraling out to other grades and other, my grade level partner, Caitlin, is here to talk about that we got together with her students, and my students taught them their deep understanding of this framework, which is boosting their writing and enhancing their writing based on the AI feedback that we got.
That's great. So thank you, Caitlin, for jumping in with this project. I'm excited to have another class participating. So can you tell us a little bit about, your first impressions of using the writing feedback that we got from AI and the partnerships that were created? From your perspective, how do you think it's changed the students' writing, or how has it changed your approach to teaching writing?
It's been transformative. I would say it has impacted my teaching and the students' learning, definitely. This week was amazing because it really also came full circle, with my students. When I first started using Magic Schools to grade their writing, it was really eye-opening because AI could catch some things that maybe teachers overlooked, not because we couldn't do it, but because simply time is, our biggest struggle, I would say. That's the resource we need more of, but AI definitely helps us with that. So I think AI and Magic Schools has been doing a great job to really internalize all of the data and create groups that are pretty spot on. You know, sometimes we have to tweak here and there, but it is like having another teacher to co-teach with almost and riff off of, which has been really nice and really successful. I've used it for partnerships in my classroom based off of reading skills and some math skills too. I know you're going to get into that in future episodes, but I've definitely been using it, you know, in writing and reading a lot, which has been cool to see. And, you know, with the writing this week, I went to Robyn and I was just noticing, you know, they're doing the iced tea, you know, it's very, you know, basic response that they're doing. They're doing what we're asking them to do. But that elaboration piece is really what AI was suggesting will, you know, get them to that 3 and where we really want them to be. So we decided to have the students become the leaders this time and give them some of that ownership. And they did most of the lesson themselves, to be honest. Robyn and I were up at the front of the room facilitating. We did the introduction, but they really took it and ran. Some of the partnerships were absolutely incredible. I even said to them today, we were debriefing with each partnership. I was like, oh, did you see me take your picture? Because, you know, we were working so nicely. They're like, you took our picture? We had no idea. They were so locked in. They were so focused. And it really was nice to see those kids rise to the occasion, especially some of the students who didn't feel as confident at the beginning of the year as writers. They have completely blossomed, and now they're sharing all that they've learned. Some of my writers seem to hold back a little bit. So I've noticed that they are starting to take a couple more risks because they have the graphic organizers, they have the feedback from AI, from their teachers, but now from their peers. So it's really encouraging them to really put forth 110% now. So it's been really awesome to experience.
That's great. That's great. So why don't you talk specifically perhaps about how you did this partnership and exactly what the kids did when they were together so we can sort of visualize what went on in the classroom?
Sure. So we took data from my students' writing pieces and Robyn's writing pieces, and we generated, you know, their strengths and their areas to work on. From there, we ran it through Chat GPT, and we came up with partnerships based on ability level. So from there, the students were asked to create a new response for paired text. So it's an informational writing piece. So the students had to read 2 texts, and then they created a quick plan. And then from there, we would chime in and help them with the strategy, because that's where my students were really lagging. That's really where they needed the most help. So we would model for them. We would write on the anchor charts. The students would go back. They would work on their own plans. We went back together the second day, so we got to collaborate a few days in a row, which was really nice. And then the kids took their plan and they typed out their response. From there, they highlighted the different parts of their plan. And that night, we ran the data again, and we were able to generate those scores and really see, you know, that increase in the level 3s.
When you've been dealing with running your students' work through AI, and you've been noticing a lots of, you know, 2s coming up, maybe some 1s in there. And do you feel that there was a difference when they came into my class and they got those 3 specific sentences, so it guided them with their elaboration?
Absolutely. It was night and day. Before, they were writing their claim. They were writing, I know this because, filling it out with evidence, maybe a very simple sentence tying it back to the claim, and then their conclusion sentence. And they thought, well, I'm doing exactly what I need to do. They really had no idea where they could really go, I think, with their thinking, with their elaboration skills. So with that method, you know, it kind of gives them that extra framework. They had the foundation, but they needed that additional elaboration strategy to really help them grow. And I've seen them write way more the last couple of days than I have all year.
And I just mentioned in the beginning of the episode that last week, a little bit less than half of my class got to that score of 3, which is on grade level for their writing, according to NJSLA. So this week, once we collaborated and we really put that whole piece, that whole full circle of the framework, as well as the elaboration sentence, as well as the editing checklist, we put all of that in, and 68% of the students got a 3 on their writing yesterday, working together.
That's great. That's so amazing. And the other piece that it was really interesting, and I'm just thinking back to, perhaps the step before, Robyn, as you were developing some of this, it was the comprehension piece that you really leaned into as well, and once they were able to kind of go back to the article that they were reading and use those 3 M sentences, what does it mean, well, ultimately they want to make it your own. What does it mean and why does it matter? That's comprehension, right? That's understanding what I've read and being able to put it into my own words. So I also think that the targeted reading comprehension instruction was so strongly linked to the task that they had to do in writing that really helped them as well. And I'm wondering if that framework, that MMM, framework could work as something a touchstone that they go back to repeatedly. Like, could that be, when they're doing their silent reading, that afterwards, stop and turn to a friend, tell your friend what you read, put it in your own words. What did it mean to you and why does it matter? So that might be a structure they could rely on throughout the year.
And looking forward, like to next year, I could absolutely agree with you, Jeanine, on that, because when we read, reading out loud to our students, we always want to read with a purpose, right? So sometimes I'll ask them to take a Post-it out, and that would be fabulous if once we added this extra elaboration piece into our writing to practice it while we're reading. So like you said, as we're reading, turn to your partner and give them that elaboration, because the speaking, role model speaking is such a great strategy for them, as well as then they're able to confidently put it into their writing.
Yeah.
I love that piece.
Starting the year, even modeling it as a jot that they can try. I think if they start doing it from the get-go in 3rd grade, they're going to just know it so easily and they can tap into it with their responses.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. And, running those benchmark comprehension scores that we did to kind of get to this point of putting in the checklist and using those elaboration sentences, when we ran benchmark data from the students' reading comprehension assessment, it was evident that these are parts where they needed support in. And that's really what led to that really full circle of that elaboration. The comprehension piece, combining it with the writing piece, really put them over the edge. And their writing is much, much stronger now, and much deeper thought into their writing. So it was really super cool. And just for the future, what we're thinking of, and this is great for any grade level that's kind of trying this, right? So we kind of taught it, right? We learned it, we taught it, my students led. So now Kate is going to have her students learn it again on their own. And now she's going to turnkey it and have her students teach it to another 3rd grade class and really kind of spiral out that concept. Not only does it build, it gives accountability, but it builds confidence.
Sure.
And, the kids are really, really, feeling so confident about themselves, which is so awesome to see as 3rd grade writers, because this is when they really get to love writing, right? In 3rd grade, they really start as writers, and you want to build that confidence at this age.
And speaking of which, you were sharing, I know earlier, but maybe you could just reshare the story about how a reluctant writer in your classroom, you just got an email recently from a parent saying what a difference that the parent had noticed in their child as a reluctant writer, really coming along this year. And it probably has a lot to do with the approach that we've, taken and modified to meet the needs of all the students. So.
Absolutely. So, personalized instruction, looking at data and personalizing that instruction to target every student's learning, it's really great. And you as a teacher, you look at data and you're like, yay, they got a 3 and yay, they're coming along. But you know what? That's us looking at it. But when the child goes home and reflects on it and feels confident and relays that to his parents, and then you get an email as a teacher the next day that says, you know what, my child, was not the love of writing in the beginning of the year. And because of the structure that you gave him and the framework that you gave him and the confidence that you gave him, he now loves writing. And what is better than that as a teacher's dream? And to know that you know that there was some kind of success there for that child to internalize that as now he is a confident writer and come back every day loving to write. So by using that ICE-T framework and personalizing that instruction, this child was successful.
That's great. So I think this is wonderful. I love the collaboration. I love the success that you guys are having with it. But Kate, I have a question for you. Do you see like AI having any other potential use cases in your classroom? Are you starting to see its role influencing what you do as a teacher or how you assess students' work? I was just curious if this little experience has, you know, kind of influenced your thinking about the role of this kind of technology in the classroom.
That's a great question. I was reflecting on my experiences with AI, and I'm going to be very honest, I was hesitant at first. It's a little scary. It's a little unknown. You know, it's so different than the teaching practices that we've been so used to. You know,
Sure.
I've been here almost 10 years and it's very different. But once you put it into action and really see how successful it is, I think it is so worth learning how to use and apply, you know, in all of our practices. I think it has been the most helpful with writing. That's really where I have personally used it the most as well. But I'm excited to try it in other areas. I know as we are teaching the students to explain their thinking more in other subject areas like math, we really, you know, are starting to tap into, you know, ChatGPT and asking it to grade, you know, how did they explain their math thinking here? What else can they do? So I think those skills are transferable, you know, for the students, but also for us as teachers. I think the more that we use it, the more I'm going to see, oh, wait, I can use, you know, AI to help me with this. Or maybe, you know, I didn't have time to make a worksheet or find a video. I can generate that and just be able to differentiate in different ways to, you know, have some early finisher work, to just provide additional resources too when parents are asking, you know, what can I do at home? You know, if we don't have an extra fractions sheet, you know, laying around, which we don't always do, you know, we could always, you know, tap into AI to get additional resources. So I think there's a lot. I think there's, you know, a lot that's yet to be uncovered, at least for me, especially. So I'm excited.
That's great.
Hey, you have a little bit of also a background in some AI coding, I know. And so,
Yes.
you know, so putting all this into effect in your classroom, what's
Yeah.
the one thing you're looking forward to next?
So a few years ago, I did a coding boot camp. So it was a full stack, you know, fully immersive, full-time coding boot camp where I learned about front-end development and then the back-end development. So I'm definitely very open to technology, but the AI piece was something that, you know, we didn't tap into. Now that I've talked to people in that field and how, you know, AI is transforming the way that they do their jobs, it's really interesting to now see the intersection in our jobs and in our fields. Like, we're not necessarily a tech field by nature, but we use so much technology. So to kind of see those two coming together for me has been really rewarding. It's definitely something that I wanted to bring more into the classroom, coding and just tech skills in general, and incorporating the AI has been very cool. So I'm excited to work with other classes, like Robyn said, other third grade classes. I know we want to try to show some of this to second grade classes, hopefully maybe do some peer mentoring next year with fourth graders. So there's a lot that, you know, I'm excited to dive into.
That's great. This is wonderful. And thank you so much. That's really helpful feedback. I always love getting feedback from thoughtful practitioners like, you know, people like you who would, you know, really be honest about whether it had any useful application in the classroom, because teachers don't have time to waste, right? So if it's proving to be useful, we don't have any time for it. So yeah. So this was really great, Robyn. What a wonderful week. Yeah.
And you know what I was going to say? If anybody wants, that iced tea kind of format, just like and subscribe and let us know, and we'll send it to you.
That's
You
it.
got it. Like and
That's
subscribe. We have to figure out how to link that below, right? We'll have to give them the
Yes.
iced tea format for sure. But thank you, ladies. And most of all, thank you for taking time on a Friday to debrief the amazing week that you had and to share all the successes and hopefully inspire others as we learn, teach, and lead.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you. See you next
Bye.
week.
Bye.